Well, I wanted to thank you, gentlemen, for joining me again to talk about visibility and measurement in the supply chain, with kind of a focus here, I hope, on applying some of that visibility and measurement in transportation logistics. So maybe just kind of ask you, what's the importance really of the visibility aspect of trying to get cycle out of our delivery processes, both global and domestic. Any kind of thoughts about that?
Well, I think on the visibility side, I mean, this is something when we interview, shipper clients, manufacturers, retailers, what's one of the biggest priorities you have? Visibility is, the number one priority for these companies, and the reason is something that was brought up earlier in our other conversation was you have to have visibility, you have to have knowledge of what's going on in order to be able to manage it and control it effectively.
Right.
And historically, companies just really haven't had that full understanding of what's happening in their network.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's almost a buzzy term, though, right? I mean, the last 4 or 5 years, we've certainly seen a lot, in the literature and your journal and other places. So what are the sort of the aspects of gaining visibility? Are we just talking about status checkpoints? What are some of the the key elements of really gaining visibility on these movements?
I think that's going to vary somewhat company to company. I mean, a lot of people just want exception reports. Right. If everything's moving according to schedule, then leave me alone. Mm-hmm. Other people want to have that real-time, full-time visibility. So that's going to vary, I think, by the demand of by the particular company. Mm-hmm. I guess part of the issue becomes I think we've done a good job domestically. I think we're very advanced domestically. Internationally, it becomes more difficult just because when something's at sea, how real time is that, for example?
Yeah, and how can we capture those events? Is the technology changing there? I mean, are we able to use? Everybody's talking about RFID and GPS dynamic devices, and is that helping this with the global movements as much, or?
I think you're seeing, on the RFID side, I mean, one of the interesting things with visibility is, I mean, a lot of it is dependent on getting status messages. So certainly the big players, the big manufacturers and the big carriers and the big companies, they've been relying on EDI messaging for a long time, right? I think where the system starts to break down a little bit is the reality is that there are many players still in supply chains that still rely on phone and fax to convey a lot of the information. So I think that's what creates a lot of the holes, especially on the international side, where you're dealing with companies and partners in other countries that don't have the same kind of broadband connectivity and internet capabilities. So even the use of web portals that could be a solution to that problem may not even be applicable in some of these other regions. Mm-hmm. But going back to the RFID piece or GPS, I think one of the things that's very interesting to look at is if you have a visibility solution that's based just on status messages, and then if you have a visibility solution that's based on actual GPS data, there is a big disconnect between what the messages are telling you, whether the product is or what's happening, versus what's really physically happening. And I think that's one of the areas a lot of companies are looking to try to bridge that gap.
And it's sort of a trust thing. I mean, the closer we get to, maybe your point, Peter, the real time, and with the aid of some of these devices bring us, the better confidence that we really understand where our goods are.
Yeah, but you really have to have a collaboration solution, because if you look at the shipper, for example, the shipper knows where his ships are. The trucker knows where the trucks are. But is that information getting into the 3PL system, and is that getting to the client? That's where all the collaboration really needs to take place. And without that, even those people who want exception status notices, they're going to get them late. Just like Adrian said. I mean, it's not going to be timely enough. If there's something, the worst thing in the world is to have a customer call and say, my shipment is not here, and you say, I don't know. Right?
That is the worst.
That's the worst thing that can happen, and that's what will happen if the systems aren't tied together, if there's not a collaboration.
That's a good point. I mean, one of the things we hear a lot about, especially in CPG retail, industry, there's a lot of chargebacks that the retailer charges the manufacturers if the truck arrived late or whatever.
Exactly.
But the big question is, well, where was the actual problem? Was it that we shipped it late? Was it that the carrier arrived late, or was it that the retailer actually received it late? The carrier, the truck might have gotten there on time,
yes,
but due to maybe there was a scheduling problem at the retailer DC, and they didn't pull that.
Door problems.
Yeah. So I think having that visibility, that's where a lot of, to your point, collaboration. I think the carrier knows when he arrived at that facility. And the shipper obviously knows what time it left its facility, but being able to merge those information points together to really see where the problem is, because I think at the end of the day, everybody wants the shipper, the carrier, and the retailer or the consignee really wants the quote unquote the truth to come out, so that wherever the problem point is gets resolved, and everybody has the same goal, is to make money. Right?
What it seems like is that the way you're talking about it is that we can actually use some of these visibility points and the capture as a way to look at our processes from the performance and efficiency of our organization. If we can get that kind of data down, we can perhaps do some measurements, what we expected the process to be, where was the variation, and then use that as almost a diagnostic. Are you seeing that in your experience as you're talking with folks out in the industry, that they're really using this kind of visibility to process mapping? Is that becoming kind of a tool?
Well, you certainly see. One simple example is carrier scorecarding.
There you go.
So that's one area where a lot of companies are using that kind of information to make sure that the commitments are being met both at the carrier and at their own end, making sure that they're meeting their obligation in terms of the number of loads that they're giving the carrier, and that the paperwork is correct and everything else. So I think that's one example. You're seeing it on the even internally on the labor front, making sure that you've got some performance metrics set up, and that you have some real-time. The buzz term is real-time performance management.
Right.
You see what's happening, so you can adjust in a more timely manner to change whatever the plan was, to correct and then be able to move forward with the expected results.